The academic writing process is a complex process that transitions a writer from a rough draft to a final draft. This process is used by lots of people that can help focus one's claim throughout the process. There are many steps in the academic writing process. These steps include pre-writing, writing, and editing. The writing process helps strengthen one piece of writing into the best possible piece it can be through editing and structured feedback. What the writing process means to me especially is that my paper can never be perfect, but by using the writing process steps, I can make it as close as perfect as I can. The writing process is used fairly a lot by people that hope to make their own piece of writing as close to perfect too. It can be a lengthy and difficult process that is determined by each situation. The writing process has been both a difficult and hard one for me. An example of a piece of writing that was difficult and lengthy to finish was my first project paper I wrote in GSW, in which I wrote about the differences in languages. Writing this piece was hard at first to work on as the rough draft, but then it didn't increase in difficulty but became lengthier. I really struggled with this because it was about a topic that I didn't have much experience with. I couldn't grasp the concept of it, but by doing the writing process, I was able to break down my ideas and to mold them in my paper to form a concise and informational paper. Pre-writing is the easiest step of the academic writing process. For me, it's just putting down words and ideas on paper. The next step after pre-writing is editing and feedback. Both works together to help strengthen a paper. My favorite part of the writing process would be the editing followed by outside feedback, because when I'm editing, I'm reading my paper and processing it. The final step of the writing process would be the final draft, which would be when the writer feels that their piece of writing is complete and ready to be seen by one's audience. When writing a paper, the writing process can be very helpful in strengthening my paper and boosting my confidence about my paper. My least favorite step of the academic writing process is the final rough draft. This may seem like an unusual step to dislike, but my reasoning is that I never feel like my paper is truly complete. I always have the feeling that there could be more, or I could fix more, or that my paper could be better. To begin with, I'm not that strong of a writer before my GSW 1120 class. Of course, throughout my writing career, I've received help and structured criticism about my writing, but I hadn't fully understood all the components of my piece of writing. That every page, paragraph, sentence, even the words matter. The placement of everything is such a huge part of how well paper flows, and especially how it is formatted. An example from a paper that I wrote for my class is my third major writing project, which I made an argument that there is a relationship between culture and language over time. This is one of my best pieces of writing because I had more of a comprehension of each component that made a near to perfect paper. I remember writing the rough draft and putting all my ideas on the paper, but without any organization or any thorough research about my topic. I eventually, with help, learned what these components were and how they could function to help me. One of the toughest components that I'm still learning about is writing a concise paragraph that focuses on one idea. With my lack of research and Branham's ideas, it took a lot to finally be able to organize each one of my paragraphs correctly. But with help and practice, I was able to have a better understanding of these challenges. One of my favorite research topics was my second writing project. This project brought me to a whole new limelight about certain topics. I got to research about topics that I hadn't ever thought needed to be researched. Some topics I researched were language is dying, bias and discrimination in language, etc. These topics I hadn't really talked about in our school or on social media, so having enough reason to research them has been very helpful. I know that after I finished that project, I would be more knowledgeable than when I first started it. I understand that if I hadn't done this project, I wouldn't be as open-minded to these ideas and less informed. I have learned so much, and I can say that writing brings a lot of opportunities to learn with it. What I mean by this is that when you're writing something or even reading it, you're learning something new with or without one knowing. The topics that I talked about in my third project relate to society a lot. The way society works is based on culture and language. They both contribute to how societies function. For the society that I live in, America, language and culture are very diverse. The research that I had used for this topic was African American language and lives of migrants settling in the United States. These were great examples because they represented what happened in our societies. When thinking of topics for each one of my projects was a process all by itself. I had to first figure out the purpose, message, audiences, and context of my paper. Did I want my paper to be informative, argumentative, educational, etc.? After deciding the purpose of my paper, I need to pick a topic that aligned with the context of my paper. An example of this was my first project in GSW 1120. I chose to inform my audience, and I chose discussing the differences in languages. The context of my paper was to involve some type of information on dialects and accents, which aligned well with my topic. This easiest part of my project was deciding who the audience would be. I chose my peers and academic professors because that's who I knew would potentially read my paper. All these components helped me to make a finished product that was developed through the academic writing process. When I first started GSW 1120, I thought that my writing ability was enough for college. I didn't realize that I had so much to learn and develop talents for. I didn't understand that there were levels to writing that I had just recently learned, that one's writing ability can be compared to grade levels. An example would be how one of my writing papers in the past was a grade 9 level of writing. But throughout this class, I've become more confident in my writing and maybe even a little more creative. Writing is an art that can be developed and can grow. There was a lot of mistakes that I had to learn from, and still sometimes are making those mistakes. But the biggest thing I learned from my GSW 1120 was how to recognize the mistakes I was making in my writing, because if I could recognize them, then that meant that I had the potential to fix them and not make them again. The hardest mistakes that I'm still learning from is my grammar. This may seem like easy mistakes to learn from, but even the smallest mistakes are the hardest to learn from. I've had so many resources because of my GSW class to learn from these mistakes and make me into the better writer that I am today. I believe that as a writer in the now, I can become even better at writing, but I have become a better writer because of my GSW class. I see myself in the future growing as a more structured writer. I think the more papers I write will become more concise and flow more easily. This is a skill that I have already progressed so far in that I know it will be more achievable hopefully soon. My academic career as a writer has a long way to go, but the practice, hard work, and from the lessons I've learned already from GSW 1120, I can become a good writer.